Hey guys, the Common Man here. So you can see I've got in front of me the GOAT Multitool. So I might be jumping the gun a little bit with this updated review. I was going to give kind of a long-term review on this later down the road, but honestly, I think I've carried it enough. I've messed around with it enough and used it enough to, I think, kind of draw a bit of a verdict on the tool. I'm going to continue carrying it, and any updates that I get, if things change later on down the road, I'll go ahead and upload a video or some shorts or something like that to keep you guys updated on how it's going. But like I said, I think I've kind of figured out what this tool is all about and how it is or is not going to work for me. Just to start off with, and kind of a spoiler alert, it's a love-hate relationship with this thing. So I haven't used the sheath at all. I don't really plan on it. I like the pocket clip. It's how I like to carry my multi-tools. So this thing, we're really not going to talk about this. So the tool itself, it looks good. Honestly, and over time, I think the looks are continuing to grow on me. I think it's a very good looking tool. And as far as the plier function goes, opening it up is very satisfying. It's very smooth. It's maintained its smoothness, and the pivots are still nice and tight. And I did actually take apart the pivots here. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it still feels good, and I've used it a fair amount. I haven't really beat on it too hard yet. That's kind of that really hard use that I'm going to put this thing through. I am probably going to go ahead and do that in the future, and then provide some updates if anything breaks or anything like that. But it still is functioning very well. I have used it for several things, and I'm very happy with it overall. So the pliers are good. As a plier tool, this thing works just fine. However, we'll go ahead and just kind of stay with the plier aspect, or this whole kind of setup when you have it open. Let's go ahead and talk about the cutting heads. So they work. The cutting heads work. I did upload a short video about how those plier heads, or I'm sorry, the cutting heads, they aren't really the greatest. So let's go ahead and just go right into it. We'll go ahead and actually give a demonstration right here. So you can see, let's just start off by saying I had a concern about the cutting edge of these bits, these cutting bits or cutting inserts. You can see how the cutting edge is very close to the bulk of material of that plier head. And, I mentioned that that's going to be a concern of mine. And as you can see, it is a bit of a problem, because this is actually the perfect example of what's going on. Do you see how it's just kind of catching the material, and those plier heads, or those cutter heads, haven't even closed all the way. And what's happening is this wire, this coat hanger, is caught between this bulk of the material on the plier head, and really it looks like it's possibly even caught. No, it's not caught on the screw, but you can see that it is caught on the edge of the teeth there. There's just not enough room for the material to pass through. So when I pull this out, look how much more that closes. So it's actually squeezing the material. And let's go ahead and take a look at the material itself. If we can get it to focus, it's just completely smashed it. So it's barely even cut it. It's just smashed the edge of that material. That's not great. Just for comparison's sake, I'll show you up against the Leatherman Arc, and you do want to do it in the right place, obviously. Go ahead and cut it, and look at that clean cut. It's really, truly a clean cut. It actually cuts it, it slices it. The GOAT Multitool really doesn't. It just kind of smashes it. Depending on what material you're cutting through, that might not be a huge deal. If you're just cutting through some soft wire, some thin wire, it's going to be fine. But if you're cutting through anything bigger than that, like a coat hanger type material, it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt, and it's going to really mess up the material you're working with. So that's a downside. I'm not happy with cutter heads. I think that should have been a different design. I don't quite understand why they designed it that way. They should have given some space for that material to eject. So that definitely, in my opinion, needs to be addressed. Another thing, for the pliers themselves and the function, this is a huge issue to me. It's just kind of annoying. You see how when I open up these handles, they just kind of move around. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of other multi-tools that do this, and they have to be spring loaded. They have to have that spring in there to open the heads. If there's no detent, if there's no locking position for these handles to actually lock into place, it has to be spring loaded. And that kind of annoys me, because let's say in the case like that, you know, if you're cutting something and these cutters get stuck in the closed position, you're not going to be able to use the handles to open it up. And although, you know, other multi-tools just use some type of a detent, function, you can definitely overcome that detent if it's stuck enough, but at least you have some way to apply some force to open those heads back up. Whereas here, you have nothing. It's just simply going to open up on you, and you're going to have to get some alternative tool or something like that to spread these plier heads. So that's kind of an issue. You know, it's probably not a huge deal because, like I said, it is spring loaded, so you're not really having to put that kind of opening force on it too often, but I just definitely see that being a problem. This relies on the stiffness of the pivot here. So it relies on the stiffness of these pivots to remain closed. There's no detent, there's no latch, nothing. It just relies on the stiffness to stay shut. And when I took this thing apart, because I did have to remove the pocket clip, which that brought up all kinds of different issues, I went ahead and put everything back together. I put these pivots back together, and I didn't do it tight enough. And what happened was when I went to close it, it just popped right back open. And I'd try closing it, it just popped right back open. Because that spring pressure in there, it was spreading the handles apart. And now, even now, if I have this thing, if I'm kind of handling it or whatever, it does kind of slowly work its way back open. And it's probably because these pivots need to be tightened up a little bit. But honestly, it's as tight as I want it to be. I don't really want it to be much tighter than this when I open up the pliers. So, you know, any tighter, it's not going to be very nice to open. Any looser, it's simply just going to spread apart all on its own in this closed position. So I think they need to come up with some kind of a detent system for that to keep it closed. These are all nitpicks, guys, but they're things that I think of, and they're issues that I just don't have with like my Leathermans. Let's go ahead and talk about the pivots themselves, because I did have to take this thing apart, like I said. And the reason I did is because the pocket clip was not where I wanted it to be in reference to the blade. So when I got the tool, basically the pocket clip was, I believe it was right here, and the blade was right here where it is now. So my obvious decision was I was going to take the blade and put it on this side so that, you know, pocket clip here, blade here. When it comes out of the pocket, you've got the blade right where you want it to be to open it up. Went ahead and made that change. I put the blade here, and it was a bit of a disaster. The blade was scraping up against the side of this bit tool here, and you can see the magnet, this magnet, which barely functions. I mean, it barely holds that bit in there. You can see, I mean, it's not coming out now, but it's barely held in there at all with that magnetic force. But the magnet sits kind of proud of that bit. It's really hard to tell. But anyway, the side of the blade was scraping up against this magnet, causing tons of grittiness, making it very difficult to deploy. And then once it was opened, the amount of force that it takes to push down on this bit here to break the lock. So you can see the way this tool functions, the way the lock functions, as you can see that it's got that kind of, watch right here, that hooks into place with that piece of steel right there. And then in order to disengage it, you have two options. You can either use this lever here to push that tongue up and then release that lock. And you can see if you do that, everything kind of slips around, and it's not very pretty. But the way you're really supposed to do is push down here. And if you can see, if I push down hard enough, it lifts that lever, but you really got to put a lot of force. It lifts that lever and allows that lock to pass underneath the material, and then it closes. It is absolutely impossible one-handed. Putting the blade here, pushing down here, closing the blade, you can't do it one-handed. And for me, multi-tools, at least the blade, in my opinion, should probably be one-hand accessible, at least my preference. So anyway, so I knew that was just not going to work. It just wasn't going to work. So what I did instead is I took the pocket clip and I went ahead and rotated it to the a different part of the tool. So instead of the pocket clip being here, I put it over here. Well, cool, right? You know, you've got a tool accessible right here. You've actually got a tool that comes in the multi-tool to disassemble it. So you can take these pivots apart with this tool. However, I went ahead and did that. I pulled this tool out of its position. So, you know, you do this whole lock, you know, unlock that, pull the tool out, lock it up. Now you got all these tools just kind of jiggling around in there, which is fine. It's not a big deal. And then you use this to undo the pivot. However, I went ahead and tried unscrewing it, and I very quickly realized this is not a captured pivot. So both of these screws, this screw and this screw, were simply spinning free. So that doesn't really do you a whole lot of good if you have a tool to take the multi-tool apart if you actually need two tools. So, you know, whatever. I wasn't super upset about that. I went ahead and got another hex head bit and I started working on the pivot. And then I very quickly realized there's another issue. It's got Loctite. So, and a lot of blue Loctite. So I tried undoing the screw, and I was demonstrating on the wrong pivot. These are actually the pivots that I had to undo up here on the plier head. But anyway, I got undoing the screw, and with the two screwdrivers, I got it all free. And then the whole barrel wanted to pull out. And, you know, whatever, not a big deal. So I pulled the barrel out, and this whole thing, you know, the whole plier head came apart from the handle, and I wanted to undo the screw from the barrel, from the actual pivot barrel itself, to get the pocket clip off of the barrel. Well, unfortunately, the screw was completely seized in the barrel. I ended up having to use a Leatherman pliers to hold onto the barrel, try to unscrew the screw, and then I just ran the risk of marring up the barrel. So I thought, you know what, let's just not even worry about it. I flipped the barrel over. So instead of inserting it this way, I just inserted it the opposite way, and it worked. It's fine. But the fact that they include a tool to disassemble the multi-tool when you actually require two tools to disassemble the multi-tool, that kind of stinks. And maybe this wasn't necessarily intended to be the tool to maintain and disassemble the multi-tool. It's just simply, I think it's a 3mm hex, but it's kind of like you get excited about that and then you go to do it and then it doesn't work, and it's kind of frustrating. And then not to mention, this thing's stripped out completely. While I was trying to undo that screw, this completely rounded off. So the material that they use here it's just too soft. It totally rounded inside the head. Thankfully the screw wasn't damaged, but this hex is now just about useless because it's totally rounded. So let's go ahead and put this back in. I am happy to say that this modular design, the whole lever and removing and putting the tools back in, it actually does work quite well. So I'm very happy about that. Let's see. Oh boy, as I say, it works really well, and then I'm struggling with it. Well, and this actually can lead me to another point, is that there is one random washer down in there, which I actually did move. There we go. And we'll go ahead and talk about that now. Thankfully, by the way, unlocking this side is a lot easier. You have more leverage because these tools come down a little bit farther. So unlocking this side by pressing on those tools works actually just fine. But anyway, we'll talk about this whole washer situation. So in its original layout, there is a small washer that you can see the gap between this shorter tool here, which is the 3mm hex head, and the blade here. You can see that there's a little bit of a gap there. It's because there's a small washer there. That washer was not originally there. It was actually over here between this. What is this? Yeah, and here's another issue, getting all these tools out of here. The clumping is just insane. Okay, so there was a washer between this awl and between the saw. I don't know why there was a washer here and not anywhere else, but there was one washer there. Well, I was having an issue with one hand opening the blade. It just wasn't happening. Absolutely wasn't happening. Every time I opened the blade, it was pulling all these tools out. It was pulling this lever up, which is still happening, by the way. So I decided if I move that washer from here and put it over by the blade, it should limit my contact point between the blade and this smaller tool, and it should hopefully make the knife easier to open. And it actually did. It did improve its opening, the ease of opening. However, it's still not really one hand it really can't be opened with one hand. It's such a pain. And then when you do it, this disengagement lever is going to come up with it, guaranteed, every time. I've put oil between the two. I've worked the two of them across each other as much as I possibly can, and it still just grabs onto that lever every time you open that knife blade, and it's a real pain. But anyway, so I moved the washer over here, and now I'm actually having an issue with the saw blade not locking out. So that locking lug on the edge of the saw blade is not sitting in that channel there. It's not locking at all. And maybe the washer needs to be on the opposite side of the saw blade to scoot it in a little bit further so that that little locking lug catches that locking channel. I don't know, but all I know is it's not locking, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. So there's another issue. You know, the clumping, I was hoping that it would get better over time. It's really not getting any better. I've put a lot of lube in here. I've moved it around a lot. Maybe it's going to take months of wearing in. I'm not sure. Maybe the black oxide coating is causing issues. I'm not sure. But the clumping is still really, really bad. It's a real pain in the butt. You know, another issue, we'll talk about the coating. The coating, you can see, is completely wearing off on this driver. It's kind of weird. This seems like the only tool where the coating is actually wearing off. It almost seems like it's I don't know, it seems like it's a different kind of coating on these tools versus the bit driver. But you can see, oh yeah, I just got myself there. All right, sorry about that. So actually something to add to the video, I just kind of poked myself with the hobby blade there, which seemed to come open kind of on its own. So that's something we're going to go ahead and add to this video. Anyway, I was talking about the coating on the screwdriver. It's wearing off. It's kind of weird. It looks like it's a different kind of coating. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway, apparently while I was opening that, the hobby blade popped open. I had no idea, and I just stabbed myself in the finger with it. That's another thing let's talk about. There is almost no tension holding these tools in, and the hobby blade is possibly the worst offender and by far the most dangerous. I mean, this thing barely needs to be popping out of there to get you. It only needs to be out, you know, about that much to do some serious damage to your finger, and I'm pretty sure that's about how far it was out just a second ago when it cut me. I mean, it's just spongy. It just barely closes, and look at that. It just wants to hang out with that disengagement lever. It's just kind of doing its own thing in there. It's really not working the way it's supposed to, I think, in my opinion. Yeah, there's just no affirmative close for these tools. They're all that way. They're all just kind of spongy, and there's no affirmative lock in the closed position. Guys, it sounds like an absolute bash fest on this tool, and I feel really bad about being so negative about it, but there's just so many problems that it's really, really hard to overlook all of these shortcomings. And I'm trying to go through my head and think about everything that I wanted to talk about that unfortunately was really, really negative. So I mean, you know, you've got the clumping, you've got the poor closing system, you've got the free spinning barrels with the harsh, you know, Loctite, which is not such a bad thing in itself, but when it comes with a tool that's supposed to take the whole thing apart, or at least, you know, you'd assume should be able to take the whole thing apart, it's kind of useless because you technically need two of them, and the tool itself completely stripped out. The pliers, you know, the cutter heads are not great. Like I said, it's squashing the material. The closing system is not great because if it's not tight enough or it starts to wear in, it's going to start walking its way open. Let's see, can I think of anything else? I mean, I think I've pretty much got it covered. Oh, another thing too, you can see that the coating is actually wearing off in a few other areas. Just little nicks around the edges, nothing too bad, but you can see I just don't think it's going to last very long. Oh, another thing, when I open up the screwdriver head, the only way you can really disengage that lock is by using the disengagement lever, which is not a huge deal, but when you do it, it wants to walk backwards and actually hop off the track. So you kind of have to give it like a forward motion and then close it all together. Or you could just give it enough force to break the lock. So basically I'm able to just disengage that lock by just giving it some backward pressure. And that's not super, that's not cool. That doesn't really inspire a whole lot of confidence for the other locking tools on this, such as the knife. And let's actually go ahead and see if we can disengage that lock just by banging it on something. Let's see. I don't want to cut myself, but all right. So yeah, I mean, that's actually locked up pretty good. So that's cool. But the fact that I can disengage other tools by just giving it some spine pressure is not real confidence inspiring. Yeah, I mean, guys, I think I've hit everything. Again, I'm not trying to just be totally negative and totally bash on this tool. It's just I think it's a classic example of probably don't buy the first version of a new technology unless you're willing to accept some pretty serious downfalls or some little annoyances and things. I think this tool has some incredible potential. I think that the modular design, the modular aspect to it it's awesome. It's something that I was really excited about. I love the idea of carrying a multi-tool with different components that if they break, if the blade wears out, if you want to get an upgraded blade steel, all you got to do is just pull this little lever here, take the old tool out, pop the new tool in, and you're good to go. You can go on the website and you can buy replacement tools that you know are probably going to break over time, so you can have a backup sitting around when you need it. The full-size bit driver, that is awesome. I love that. I think that's a great idea, and honestly, it's done very well. It's done pretty well in this tool, and it even has almost like a centerline drive. That's done incredibly well. There's a lot of very exciting aspects to this tool, which is the reason that I bought it. All of these little details that I was excited about in this tool. It's just overall, I think the execution could have been done better. Like I said, it being the first run, the first iteration of this tool, there's some things that I'd be willing to accept, some issues, but I think in the form that it is, with my experience and the fact that I'm seeing a lot of other people with kind of similar issues, I think they really need to go back, maybe not go back to the drawing board altogether, but I really think they need to be coming up with some fixes and some solutions, and maybe even coming out with a second iteration of this tool that addresses some of these issues. I don't think I can really recommend it for the price unless you really don't mind fiddling a lot with your tool, and if you accept the fact that it's just a two-hand operational tool, and you're gonna have to put up with some little quirks. But anyway, guys, that is the GOAT Multitool. That is my short-term review, I guess. Again, I think I'm still going to put this thing to some use, and I'm still going to try some hard use things to see how it stands up. But as of right now, yeah, I'd say go with a Leatherman. I think that's the way to go. Anyway, thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching. Sorry for the negative video. I don't think, I don't know. Maybe I could have been a little nicer to this thing, but that's just how it is. Please leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Did you experience any of the same things that I did? Did you experience anything that I didn't? Please let me know. And if you want to see more of my videos, I've got a lot more coming. Please consider subscribing. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye-bye.